very much. Happy birthday, and please tell me you're doing something more fun than this celebrating tonight.
I'll take care of that last night.
Okay, perfect. You couldn't hear that out there. He said he took care of it last night because, I mean, although we are an amazing crowd, we're not, probably not birthday worthy at this point. So anyway, happy birthday. Thank you for being here with us.
So
Okay, acknowledgement of public requests to speak. We do not have anyone this evening that is here to speak, so we will move on to 2A. Actually, before we do that, I just want to acknowledge we have 2 board members missing tonight. They are joining our meeting a little bit late, so we're going to go ahead and begin the discussion now, but they should be joining us in just a little bit. But for those of us that wanted to start, the meeting at 6 o'clock, we want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. So, item 2A, we have our career development and performance compensation plan for the 2021 school year with changes to performance pay awards. I think we might have a trio of folks, but maybe Gina Jones is going to start.
We actually have one of our committee members, and the teachers from Broadwood, so let's not follow this.
Okay, perfect.
And Karen Williams is here. She's also, she's the administrator on the committee now.
Perfect. Okay, well, I will just ask you to say your name and then just speak in the microphone so the folks there in internet land can hear you.
no problem. Madam President, ladies and board, nice to be here. My name is Scott Bollinger. I'm an 8th grade history teacher out of Raleigh Middle School. It's my 26th year in the district, so we're counting down the last few years, which is fine. All right, so, and Karen Williams will be up here if there's questions or anything like that. All right, so the career development and performance compensation plan, we sent out a survey to the teachers on proposed changes, and we're going to present to you how they voted and so forth, as what they were happy with, from what I can tell. All right, so career development and performance compensation plan, 457 responses from the 598 certified staff eligible. We needed 418, which is 70%, to pass the changes, and we made that on all 3, so it looked that good. All right, so the next screen is going to be just everybody that's on the team from the district, the schools they represent. There's a large list of people that contribute to this every time we have a meeting. It's a good group of people. Everybody really kind of knows what they're talking about, and it's fun to work with them. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is to indicate the number of years you have been with the Litchfield Elementary School District. I'm kind of colorblind, so it's a little difficult from this distance, but from I think it's the red one is 4 to 6 years. There's 23% of the teachers are in that area. The blue is 1 to, oh, thank you very much. The blue is 1 to 3 years, which is 31%. I think it's a purplish color. It's 7 to 10 years. 15% of the teachers in the district are between 7 and 10 years, and then the orange or auburn color is 30% or 11 years or more. Okay, first thing we're going to look at is the attendance award replacement. Teachers will, in professional development, in the past we had everything, this was based on attendance. We've just now looked at teachers. We now done professional development. Teachers will participate in 15 hours of professional development. Professional development is defined by the number of hours teachers participate in professional development between June 1st, 2020 and May 7th, 2021. Professional development can take place during the school day or outside the school day. A log will be kept by the teacher and turned into their supervisor. A benchmark will be due in January and final log in May, similar to the TLP. So in January, we will submit something to our supervisor, so they can see our progress towards our hours and so forth. We are waiting to see if we can get this into the online teacher evaluation system or if it will be a paper copy this year. I have not heard anything on that yet. Okay, career development development, the chart will show you that as of August of 2020, level 1 would be 14.4% of the teachers are at level 1. Level 2A is going to be a small fraction of that. Level 2B, again, looks like it's probably around 6-7%. And then the majority of teachers in the district are level 3 at 77.2%. Okay, so when this was put forward to the teachers, and again, it gives you the wording. It said, do you approve of replacing the attendance goal with the above listed professional development goal? 451 of the teachers said yes. That was 98.7. Six teachers voted no. Okay, so it was very well received by the teachers throughout the district. Okay, standard 5, professionalism. Next one is currently employees who receive any written form of disciplinary notice, either letter of direction or letter of reprimand or greater discipline, will result in ineffective, inapplicable category of standard 5 professionalism and will not receive the portion of the 301 money. Recommended, employees who receive a letter of reprimand or greater discipline will result in an ineffective, inapplicable category standards and will not receive this. The rationale behind that was a letter of direction is basically a warning to the employee, hey, something went wrong, you made a bad decision, whatever it might be, and we're letting you know officially that what you did was wrong. But you're not, this way, if the employee, this gives the employee a chance to fix whatever they did wrong without incurring a penalty. And so, where a letter of recommend is definitely a much higher, like a larger offense. A letter of direction is just a lower one. It's just kind of reminding, like Mrs. Bolger comes in 2 hours late to work, I should get a letter of, direction, and then I just don't let it happen again. It passed 450 votes, 98.7% of teachers said that they liked the idea that six people voted no at 1.3%. Standard 6, student growth. The governing board modified the requirement for student growth components for 2019-2020. Due to COVID closures, students were not able to take end of the year assessments for teachers to measure growth. Since we had beginning of the year to mid-year for grades 3 through 8, all teachers use school-wide growth in math and reading. The recommendation is to use the school-wide growth model as a temporary replacement during the COVID closures, considering the uncertainty of when assessments will be taken. When school resumes a typical schedule of 2021, we will revert back to our current student growth components. Current both classroom growth and school-wide growth are included. Teachers who receive a minimum of 18 out of 38 points on standard 6 will receive the portion of the 301 money. This was voted on, 457 teachers voted yes, and nobody voted no. So that was extremely well received by the staff. There was a lot of worry about how is this going to work, when we don't know when we're going to have testing and how long we're going to have the students in our classroom. So this was very well received by the staff. That's it, ladies. Any questions?
I don't have any questions directly on this, I don't believe. Kim or Melissa? Okay, I mean, I have discussion and conversation, but I don't have any specific questions. So if you do, I'll open the floor now for questions. So Mr. Bolger, please.
Yes, Ms. Walker. I have a couple of questions just on clarification for those who aren't as intimately knowledgeable on career development and what a couple of the slides mean. So on slide 7, when it says indicate your career development placement as of August 2020, and it has level 1, level 2A, level 2B, and level 3, can you tell me what those levels are and what they mean?
All right, so the first year teacher will be level 1, and they have been a long time since I've been a level one, but they have certain requirements that they will meet through the year. Their student growth component isn't as high as a level 3 teacher. The expectation is the first year. So they're getting their feet wet and they have certain requirements that they'll meet. Your second year, you become level 2A. The student growth component jumps up a little bit. We're still understanding that you're only a second year teacher. You have additional things you have to do, but it keeps it within reason. And then your third year is level 2B. Again, it's a little bit of a jump, gets added, and so forth. The student growth component gets up to like, I think it's 0.85, 0.7, it's somewhere up in that range. And then after 3 years, you become a level 3 teacher. At that point, your student growth component, I think if I remember right, jumps up to 0.95. And the expectation is you've been around a while. This is how they expect a little bit more out of you. And so you're compensated a little bit more. And it grows each time you're with each year you're within the district.
Okay, thank you. And then on slide 12 that talks about student growth, tell me more about the numbers that are included in here with the 18 out of 38 points on standard 6. Tell me what that really means in plain English. Or you can defer to someone else.
I'm probably going to defer to somebody else, but Karen, do you want to add in on that?
Depending on what your growth coefficient is, that's how many points you get. So when he was talking about like a level 1 teacher would be a point, you could expect a 0.65 and above for a growth coefficient, then that would be like 0.60 to 0.69 to 7 points. And I'd be happy to share this with you, like in writing, so you can see it. A growth coefficient of 0.7 to 0.79 is 9 points. 0.8 to 0.94 is 11 points. And then 0.95 or greater is 13 points. So depending on how high your growth coefficient level is, you get a certain number of points.
So the 38 points is based on math and then reading, or what? How do we get to 38?
Because right now, the way it's set up with the teachers, not what we want to do for the coding piece, is that the teachers, it's their classroom reading and math, and then their school-wide reading and math. So you have 4 opportunities at, 13 points for yours weighted. So I should probably, because I don't know the exact weights of those, but off the top of my head, but your classroom data is typically weighted heavier in a regular school year than your school-wide data. So the highest you could get was 13 points. Let's say if you are a level 3 teacher, you do 0.95 growth coefficient for both math and reading. So you get 26 points, which you get 13 for each one of those. And then you have the school-wide or the grade level ones, which are 5 points each for that same category. And then school label results, which we're not discussing.
So we've got 13 plus 13 plus 5 plus 5 plus 2. That's what you're saying, adds up to the 38. And the 2 is?
So your school label results,
School
and A
label.
label is a 2, is 2 points, a B label is 1 point, and a C is 0 points.
Okay. So the 213, so 26 of those points is based on your classroom, normally. And 10 of those points is based on your overall grade or school?
Well, grade level.
Okay, so
In
the
a
5 and
typical
5.
school year.
Okay, the 5 and 5 is your grade level. Okay, I'm sorry, I just want to understand. Okay, so the max points is 38, so if you were beyond everything, you would get perfect on all of those. And 26 out of the 38 points is based on your specific classroom performance. 10 of those points are based on your grade level, and 2 of those points are based on the entire school in a normal school year. Okay, but this year we're saying we're going to base all 38 potential points on school level. Okay, on the school label?
School-wide data. So it's what we did last spring where we only had the valid assessments from 3rd through 8th. So if you're in elementary school, it's 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade data that we used for the growth.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get to here is 18 out of 38, when it's based on the school-wide data, is that still apples to apples with 18 out of 38 on the usual year student growth?
I don't know how it could be apples to apples. It's actually because your school-wide data could probably be a little bit lower and you would still get it. So if you were, let's say, you were growth coefficient 0.7 to 0.79, that's 9 points. That was your school-wide data, which very rarely do we have a school that has school-wide data that low. Almost everyone's growth is 1.0 or more. Then you would be at that minimum 18 points and still get it.
Okay, so you're saying historically, based on school-wide data, if we adopt the recommendation, basically all teachers would be awarded this portion of the performance pay.
We don't know what the student growth is going to look like. I mean, we would hope that people wouldn't, but we had schools that did not fall into the 0.95 or higher category last year, but we didn't have any schools that were below 18.
Okay, I think we'll discuss that more. Thank you for the explanation on how that score is determined.
Melissa, do you have any questions specific to this, the details portion of it? No, okay. I have some comments, but I just first wanted to say thank you, Scott, to you for your work in coming here and explaining everything to us and presenting it, but also to everyone on the committee. I know this is above and beyond your normal workday, and having to come together and try and represent, 580 something teachers and make sure that you represent their voice is a very important part of this process. So thank you for taking the time and making it a priority. I think it's important for everyone to know who's representing them. So thank you very much. Okay, so in terms of discussion, I would like to lead the discussion in the following way, if that's okay with the two of you. Let's just kind of start from the top. And so attendance was replaced with professional development, and then we can go down to professionalism and we go to the growth coefficient, just to kind of take each piece systematically and go through it. Okay, so the first piece is the replacement of the attendance marker with professional development. I might get these numbers a little wrong, but I think, as mentioned, the 15-hour requirement would be for all certified teachers, and then you have some administrator levels, which would be up to 21 hours, I believe, for that. I will start the conversation by saying that I think our district has done a phenomenal job, probably always, but especially in the last 2 years, to increase the opportunities for professional development for all staff. We've seen lists and charts of number of hours, and then there are thousands that teachers have done. I know last year alone with the disruption in school, instead of just staying home and quarantining, teachers did hours and hundreds of hours worth of professional development. And we're so appreciative of that, because I know the board is very supportive, has always been. I know Jody is a huge proponent of being prepared with proper training and development is what is going to allow our staff to learn and grow and create new things that you wouldn't learn otherwise unless you have that. So with that being said, I know quite honestly this is going to be one that our staff is going to knock out of the park, because it's important to them, it's important to the leadership, and I know from what I can see, our leadership does a great job of modeling that sort of professional development requirement, if that's what you want to call it. What I will say to that is my fear in setting this bar at 15 hours is that probably the majority of our teachers have already accomplished this goal. before school even started. They would have done 15 hours of professional development in pre-service before school started. Obviously, they had to have a lot of training this year because of COVID and cleaning protocols and technology and distance learning, and so many things. So again, just increasing their exposure to professional development. But I think strategically, when we look at performance pay, we're asking for something more than you would do that you were already required to do. And so if we're talking about providing extra pay for anything, I think being able to achieve that in just 1 week out of the school year means that we probably haven't set the bar high enough. Ken, thoughts? We'll just go down that way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to go back to how I always try to look at things is, let's take a step back and discuss what the purpose of this performance pay is. Is it to, is it based on merit? Is it based on going above and beyond? Or is it really just a way for us to pay teachers from a different bucket? And do we expect, I mean, I think based on what I know, and I want to discuss this, so this is why I'm glad we're talking about this, you know, from my experience in corporate America, something that's like a bonus, and we consistently call this attendance bonus for years. So, but maybe I'm thinking of it in the wrong terms. Maybe it isn't a bonus, and it's really just something that we do want 100% of our teachers to attain. So for me, that's kind of what I want to go back to is that purpose? Is the purpose for everyone to receive the 301 monies? Or is the purpose to have teachers who are stretching themselves and extending themselves to receive these funds?
I think it's a good question. I think Superintendent Gunn, please jump in with your comments as well. I think, to your point, it's always been called an attendance bonus. I think the title of this is performance pay. So I think while I know this board is 200% committed to paying teachers what they're worth and increasing their base salary, you know, over the last several years, have done a good job even reaching into our emergency rainy day fund to make sure that they get the increases they deserve. So to me, it's not about paying teachers, and I think we've tried to do that as best we possibly can. I think performance pay should be just that. It's a merit-based system, and I think we should create goals that are attainable, absolutely, within the scope of your work that you do every day in the contract. But I'm of the mindset that if this truly is a bonus, then you should perform to a specific standard in order to reach that. That's just my opinion. Melissa or Elaine, would you like to comment?
I have similar questions as far as the hours, the amount of hours that we were asking of them. I'm not looking to put a ton of extra work on our teachers because I know they work a ton already, but at the same time, I too look at like we're replacing the attendance bonus portion, so it's supposed to be for a little bit above and beyond. So I would want to know, like, I know this year we've done a lot of extra hours, but what does our normal typical year look like? It's hard for us to know right now. I feel like we're all stuck in this COVID time of how many hours we put in last year and how many hours we're putting in this year because of the changes we've had to make. But typically, because what we do now is not just for right now, but it's also something we're going to be looking at going forward years forward when things do hopefully get kind of back to the normal way of reality for us. And so what does it typically look like for our staff as far as hours go? I would want the same thing because I don't want them to just met it and they're done at the end of the year because we want them to have incentive to keep doing it throughout the year.
Gina, did you want to share kind of how you came up with how the committee worked on the hours?
There's a couple things I wanted to address based on the performance pay and the thought that teachers need to go above and beyond. And what's in statute is really like we kind of have a choice of things that we can use, of options, different options, and you can go outside the box. But for example, the expectation isn't necessarily for teachers to go above and beyond because we can use responses from parent surveys, parent satisfaction surveys, student satisfaction surveys. You can use attendance for staff, you can use attendance for students. So it really is in the normal scope of their work, what they're doing and how they're performing within that. And as far as the 15 hours goes, we we wouldn't typically have this many hours, and we obviously have days at the beginning to give professional development. So, yeah, this year is a little bit front-loaded, but from the research that we did with districts around the valley, 15, I didn't see anyone under 15. They were all at 15 if they were using professional development for a performance pay over 3 hours. So, and we don't have a typical one fit, Melissa, because they check their own professional development hours right now solely for the purpose of recertification to submit those, but I'm sure it's about 115.
I think I just did some quick math to kind of address that, because I do agree, we don't always have 5 pre-service days. We don't always have, all of these sort of front-loaded training requirements or even possibilities. But if you look at our current school calendar, we have 9 half days and 1 full day of teacher in service, and we have 5 pre-service days. So that's 15 days that are, again, not all used for professional development, obviously, but probably a good portion of that time could be used for that, or could be used to, go towards that goal. So, I mean, we're giving them 15 days to fulfill that requirement. That's literally within their contracted time, right? And I agree, I don't think that we should ask them to do this next weekends or things like that, and it should only be during their contracted time. But, I would expect them to do more than an hour a day on those days for professional development, especially like the pre-service where they've already achieved the goal. They've already met 15 hours. So I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I'm just saying, we're only going year by year. We're only quoting this for this year. So based on what I'm looking at this year, I think providing a performance pay bonus for teachers that have already achieved something before school even started doesn't feel like that bar is high enough to me. When we know they're going to be doing more, we know they are. The incentive, and Melissa, to your point, the incentive to do more goes away because you've already achieved it. So you don't have any reason to continue to do that.
I think it's an intrinsic motivation. I don't think that it's necessarily an incentive. I don't think the incentive goes away at all. Our teachers will still be as actively involved in their professional development and as engaged and striving to do their best regardless of it's 15 or whether it's 30 hours. So, I mean, if we were using, let's say we were using student satisfaction surveys, they have 180 days of every day what they're doing to make those satisfaction surveys show good results or use a percentage of satisfaction from those or something like that.
So one of the things I hear you saying is that we've already accomplished this. What I know of our teachers going around and talking to them is that they have gone above and beyond this year. The amount of training that they've done, they've pushed themselves to levels that almost busted them because of all the different platforms and trainings and expertise that they had to learn. So of any year, this is the year I think that every single one of them who accomplished that deserves this bonus, because just seeing what they accomplished already blows me away. And to see that their hesitation of going into this because it seemed like a mountain in front of them, and their resiliency and their effort to accomplish all this, this is the year I think of any, that even though they've already accomplished this, what they've accomplished has blown all of us away.
No one's disagreeing with that.
Oh, no,
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 it's
what Danielle was saying, that they've already accomplished this, and so at this time of the year, and quite honestly, that would be a hesitation for me, except this year, watching them, what they've gone through, has really just shown me that.
And if I could just add one more thing, the committee would be happy to bring this back to the teachers. We do an end of the year wrap-up survey for career development, and we can put this back out, questioning 15 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, what the range would be. But in the end, ultimately, 70% of our teachers have to vote and approve this. So we need to know ahead of time that this is something that they can do. It is partially teacher driven.
I don't disagree with that either. However, the fact does stand that this has already been accomplished, and I know that our teachers will go above and beyond and do more. Two, I guess, things I'd like to bring up in relation to that. Number one, I don't want to today or any other day compare our district with every other district in Arizona. We can do more, we do more consistently. That's why we're one of the highest rated districts. So I don't want us to set the bar at the highest that we saw someone else to do necessarily. That can be a good starting point, but I think we can and are more than capable of doing more. Secondly, I think it is fiscally responsible to ask our teachers to participate in more PD because we have PD that we're putting on that sometimes is not well attended and might not be used as efficiently as it potentially could be if we asked teachers to actually do more.
And it will be easier for them because learn from technology is in the process of having the PD log, just like the teacher leader project log is in the system, so they can go in and everything's documented electronically. So that didn't have that for sure, but we just kind of been wrapping that up with these days. That'll be nice. Everything in one place.
Easy to document. Elaine, do you have any comments in regards to this?
I have questions. So everybody up here is talking about hours to date. Do you know how many hours there so far? Would you guess?
I would guess 9 would be the minimum.
Okay, and so how many hours are on the calendar for other PD over the next year to reach that 15 or is it?
It's about that.
Right. And so this is kind of a swap, am I right? So that this is the way for us to reach our average teacher salary outside of the attendance bonus, which is usually considered as that average teacher salary.
So this is a part of the 301, but it's part of the bonus package that we do show. It doesn't, I'd have to have Wendy chime in on the average teacher, but I think it is a combination of all of their monies.
Right, so when you tell me that this is what our average teacher makes, that's taken into consideration, that they have had these professional development days, or their attendance bonuses or whatnot. Great. So, because of COVID, and because of the time lost, just dumbing it down because I'm pretty sure that I'm around this. This is just a way for teachers to still get the wellness outside of their attendance.
Well, we wanted to step away from attendance because we knew that it wasn't definitely appropriate. It was definitely recommended from the executive orders from the governor, plus APD to not have anything that's punitive because you want people to not feeling well to not come in. So that was one piece. And then what we wanted to do was to research what other surrounding districts have done in the past to see what other options people have besides attendance, and professional development was one of the more popular ones that a lot of districts did. And that one definitely, I think, that's aligned with a lot of what we already do in regards to our requirements and, you know, our goal for professional development. I would say that 301, when you look at the $301, I think when you go back to the intent of what that was for, was to increase teacher salaries and compensation, and that's pretty much the heart of what it is. That's why the majority of the funds within that are linked directly to teacher pay. So I think that was a big piece and component of it. They did link a percentage to performance. Some of it just goes straight into their base salary, and then there's a third pot that you do a mixture of things. So I think that was the, you know, when you probably can talk or speak to 301 a little bit more than I can, but I think that was the main piece of it. So it was wanting to make something that's attainable, achievable, that keeps our level at a high level, but not typically like private industry where it's truly like, this is the bonus. If you don't jump to this level, then you don't, you know, and you don't ever even see, a lot of times in private industry, you might see the amount, but it might come in increments, or it might be just a little bit larger stretch to get to. I was going to comment too on the points component when you were talking about that. That's part of their evaluation too. So you're worried, those are points that are linked to their overall performance and their evaluation. I know that was kind of separate. So they have to earn enough points to keep that high level to be able to maintain the level. So they'll drop levels if they don't achieve it, or they would be a
So it's
lower
within
level.
their own hours to reach that 15 hours. So if you're only at 9 right now, we have PD development scheduled on the calendar, then 15 hours is what you all agree is attainable and fair.
Well, that's what our committee, so even so we can,
And
our presentation,
so
so us. So we have a committee that representative from every school and then preschool and then three administrators.
representative teachers.
Yes, administrators, all certified, because it's only applicants certified, this is from the state. So, that's what they brought back. So they come to me, we discuss things, they go back, they pull part of their responsibility is being heard about the representative, school meetings with their staff. They hold meetings with their staff, they discuss the things that were talked about, they get their feedback, they bring it back to the group, so then we narrow it down to, well, the professionalism really was a recommendation from our attorney for the other side piece, but the professional development piece. But that's kind of how that came back. There were a couple other things that we were looking at that we went out and discussed.
And this is a different committee than what you typically have. This happened.
This is a long-standing career development committee, and there is some turnover, some people are new every year, some people, like Mr. Bowler, have been on this committee for a long time, and know the history of it, and can really see well to as you saw. So, it's a good representation.
No, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I think it's fair. I think that this is what the committee has come back with, especially if it's teacher involvement. If you're only at 9 people right now, and knowing that there's more coming along each month, to Melissa's point, will there be other opportunities? I'm fine with it.
I just want to make a clarification. Gina, when you say that they have probably had a minimum of 9, I would venture to guess the majority of teachers have already met the 15-hour mark. Is that true to say?
I think go back to our professional development for those first 3 days and add them up. It was kind of, split up. We had 11 PD for the online thing, so there would be 3 hours up there, 3 hours up there, 2 hours up here, 3 hours. But then some of the things that you're doing on your site aren't necessarily professional development, they're meetings. And so all of those hours don't count. Just because we had 5 days of training doesn't mean they had, all of that is professional development.
I totally understand.
But
I'm
yes,
just-
some teachers
Yeah.
probably aren't 15 or even more.
Right, absolutely. Because I mean, out of 5 pre-service days, you would say, a minimum of 3 hours a day. To make these comments earlier, these guys were training nonstop with, there's so much being thrown at them in terms of technology, protocols, safety protocols, all of these kinds of things. So while you're saying that there is probably a minimum of 9 hours, I would venture to guess that the majority of teachers, or a good portion of teachers, on the income. We just put it down tonight. Have already been able to meet that requirement based on the number of days they've already, because we did have additional days this year and the year that we haven't. So just to the lady's comment, I just want to clarify that just because 9 is the minimum does not mean that people have not already achieved. Many people have not achieved this. Okay, I think we need to. Go ahead.
Well, I like their teaching, I think about it, this really is our way to have their salary be forward, saying, that's my understanding. This is a way to be able to hear more on the classes that you're saying. If that's the case, then I can want us to figure out your survey experiences are unhappy about something. I mean, I just want to create some activity that's so up and down and prepare surveys. So it's just a like very certain this year, not every year.
Well, that's where I go back to the question that I asked previously, or just put out for discussion, which is, even though historically we have used this as a way to compensate the majority of our teachers, as a board, we have the power to change that. So, I'm not saying we should change that today, but I'm saying that's something that we have the ability to say, we would actually like this to be more of a stretch goal rather than a giving goal. And maybe we're not prepared to have that full conversation tonight. And maybe we're not prepared to have that full conversation in light of COVID. But maybe that's something that we want to discuss going forward for future years I do think, even replacing the attendance piece with the PE piece doesn't mean that we won't come back and revisit if we have negative impacts on attendance and sub rates and all of that. We could come back and reinstate this at another time. My thought on the PD is I like the professional development replacing the attendance award. I like where that's going because I feel like the PD is a win-win for us, win-win for students, win-win for teachers. I like that part of it. I personally would like to see it higher than 15 hours. But that's.
And I am prepared tonight to say, this is performance. I understand that we want to pay our teachers as much as we possibly can, and sign me up because I will find any dime or dollar that we have in our budget to make that happen, absolutely. But if this is performance pay, and that's what we're calling it, and these have been goals, the attendance goal, it is a stretch goal. Because we're giving you, we were giving you more days to take, and we were asking you not to take. So it was a choice. They had paid time off that they could have taken, and they didn't, because if you took 4 or less days, then you were given these bonus. So I would argue that this has been a bonus structure. We called it attendance bonus. To me, this is not just another way to pay teachers. I think our school district has always had very high expectations of our teachers because we know that 100% of them can and will live up to that. They will not have any problem doing this professional development. They already have it. So I guess my thing is I don't feel like we wouldn't be taking money away from teachers by stretching that goal. I would say if we're currently asking, the recommendations for 15 hours and 21 hours for administrators, why don't we increase proportionally teachers to 21 hours and then, administrators up from there? A small step. I'm not asking to double it. I'm just saying we're giving them multiple, 15 days of opportunities to make up that time. And I absolutely have every, confidence that they will be able to do that hands down. And it is a gimme that everyone is saying.
Can I just add one more piece to that? Is before we can bring anything to you for approval, it has to be approved by 70% of the teachers eligible for enrollment. So if you're asking for a change, whatever specific change you're asking for goes back out to survey, and we need that 70, so the 400, however many were in there, to approve that before it can come back to the board.
Okay. I'm okay with it.
And if that is not approved, then we stick with what we had last year.
I would not ask our attorney what we do if the board doesn't approve set performance pay for teachers.
I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with that, because we survey our teachers, we say we want to back from them, and we want to back from them, and we keep this back from them. And so I think that's what we're going to care. I think that's important.
I absolutely care what they have to say. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it's a matter of where we want that bar to be set. I absolutely think that is attainable for every teacher. We are giving them 15 days to accomplish that. I appreciate all the survey results. Absolutely. It has nothing to do with that I don't appreciate what they have to say. I don't want to do anything that they are not okay with, and they don't see also attainable. But they were only given one option. We don't know what they would say about anything else because we weren't given that chance. They weren't given that chance.
They were given the opportunity to give feedback prior to the survey. So here are some things we're discussing, take that up to your staff, talk to your staff about that, bring back because it's a time-consuming process, and it is per statute that 70% approved. Anytime we make a change to this plan, we haven't made a change to this in years and years and years. I think most of our teachers would say that's the first time they voted on a change to the performance pay.
Sure.
So there was that feedback initially, and this is what we sit down to.
Thank you.
So I think that Danielle, to your point, we want to consider adding more professional development as a bonus or attendance bonus outside of COVID. That's definitely something that we can sit down and consider. I think that if we get into the bonus, then we're clearly going to have to realign what our average teacher salary is, because I don't know in the corporate world, but people ask what your average salary is, including bonus at any time. And 70%. I don't know if I missed something. It makes it sound like.
That's
teachers
just
are
statute. That's not all. That's just what the statute says.
In
Not
our
all the
policy.
statute. The Arizona revised statute. It'll say Arizona.
Oh,
That's the statute, is that if you make a change to the performance pay, 70% of the certified staff eligible for that performance pay have to approve the changes by 7%.
and these were teachers that came together, gave their administrators the information from the survey, the administrators came to you guys, you had meetings, they went back to the teachers go back to admin, and back to you, so it's been collected going forward.
Well, for the most part, admin's not involved. We have 3 administrators.
Okay. Oh, that's good. I like it.
So basically, Elaine, the committee did a survey, and what is presented to us is basically the result of that survey, which is how they know the number of teachers that responded. I mean, 1% said no to 2 of these, and 0% said no to the third. So I think if we could increase our responses, that change those numbers.
To Melissa's point, I think that we have asked for their
Okay, we have 2 other items to go in this same thing, so let's go ahead and talk through the other 2 items and then we can vote overall, because we're not gonna vote on them individually, we just vote for all 3 of the changes. Tanya, did you have anything?
I was just kind of picking the ball.
Okay, all right, well, that's the first piece, with the replacement of the attendance bonus with the professional development. The second one is professionalism. So I'll open the floor for questions or comments on the change to professionalism.
I guess I'm just not sure. I know that Gina referenced, and in a previous conversation, Jody had referenced our attorney being the instigator, if you will, of this particular change. Can you tell us more about that, Jody?
Yes. So this year, when we were handling a certain situation, our attorney was involved, and then we were walking through all of the pieces and all of the effects of the situation. She had recommended that the performance pay for professionalism should link to something that is in personnel. So the disciplinary action below the letter of reprimand for him was called the supervisor file, and then the letter of reprimand is in personnel file. So she recommended that with the severity of something before you pull money, it needs to be something that's severe enough in the personnel file, not something that you're just handling like at a school level issue or concern.
So my question to that is, because this is replacing, well, this one isn't, this has always been this way. But for example, attendance, your attendance doesn't go into your personnel. Like when you leave our district and you go to another district, that's a question, not really statement, I'm just asking, right? So before, when we had attendance as part of this bonus structure, that wasn't something. So if you didn't get this performance pay, you didn't get goal 1 because of attendance. It was, we were able to sort of pull that money back, if you will, without something being actually in the file. Because it wasn't, attendance isn't typically put there, is that correct?
Not necessarily in their file, but it is documented on their sheet for their performance award, which I believe goes into their file. So, I mean, it is documented in some way, but not necessarily like their
Okay. Any other questions, comments? I had asked previous to the meetings as some backup to understand what the steps are, what the levels are, and how things get to your file with the supervisory file versus your personnel file. So supervisory is what you're considering like on the school level. Personnel file is kind of what policy around in your professional career from district to district or whatever. So yeah, if you want to walk through the steps between the two different ones.
The lowest level is a verbal warning. The next step from there is a written warning. The next step from that is a letter of direct. Those are all at the supervisory file level. Then we jump to letter of reprimand, letter of suspension, and then recommendation for termination.
So in essence, the change is moving this standard of professionalism to the, from the third notice of wrongdoing, let's say, to the fourth notice. So right now, you get a verbal warning, you get a written warning, and then a letter of directive as it states today, you would, on the third chance, you would not be awarded goal number 2. The recommendation is to move that from the third sort of step, if you will, to the fourth, which is the letter of reprimand, which is then placed in the personnel file. So my concern is that while I understand England, I think I'd like to maybe dig into that more because I certainly don't. My objective is not to increase the liability of the district, obviously, legally, but I'm having a hard time giving someone 4 chances to get this award money if they're doing something incorrect that is needed 3 different levels of warnings. Does that make sense?
Yes, what I would say to that is, we know we have amazing teachers. So realistically, Jody, I mean, how many people on an average year are getting either a letter of directive or stepping it up from there to a letter of reprimand? I would hope it's next to none, but I don't know that information.
Monica, chime in on that. I would say, I don't think it's very often. I mean, I can only speak to the ones I've had to deliver. So to answer your question on how many letters of directive certified staff receive, or how many we receive this school year, approximately 5. So one of the things I wanted to add to what Superintendent Dunning was explaining, there's also another piece to the letter of reprimand that we really need to. So when you receive a letter of reprimand as a certified staff person, you actually have the right to a hearing. So you have the right to contest and challenge that letter. So there's a hearing process. So really, there's just more due process tied to that. And so what we're finding is when you have that due process, we really want that piece to become relevant if the employee decides to challenge that by appealing it to also the evaluation of the career development. Because there is a page in the career development document that explains appeal procedure, and that is a policy or a procedure that can be followed if there's any loss of money. And so we really felt like we needed to connect the 2. So you have an appeals process procedure in the career development document that is reviewed at the career development committee level. And then, but we also wanted to see that that certified staff member had also that other due process to challenge that level of demand. And so we prefer to see that they go through that hearing process to challenge that. And then if that is obviously they're able to win that hearing, then the money would not be something that they could lose. So they do not have to exercise the steps for the evaluation. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yes, that makes sense to me. Let me ask you one follow-up question. I mean, it makes sense that because there is a loss of monies, but that goes back to thinking that this is guaranteed. Of those 5 on average that get a letter of directive, how many of those would you estimate go on to continue whatever behavior then gets them a letter of reprimand?
So obviously with discipline, it's always an opportunity to help the employee correct the behavior. So we generally do not see it escalate to the next level. In some cases we will. I can also say that in most cases, those employees do not return the following year. It's not really something that a certified person feels well about, for not receiving that money at the end of the year. That certainly has been a consequence. And so again, we just wanted to kind of tighten that process and strengthen, the difference between letter of command.
So Monica, do you think that not receiving these funds are tied to them not returning, or because that used to happen at the letter of directive level, or do you think just receiving a letter of directive in general, they kind of see the writing on the wall and say this is not the place for me?
I mean, I think it can really just depend. I kind of see it both ways. A lot of times the board certified staff are not going to be happy with receiving a letter of directive. We usually don't resort to a letter of directive unless there's been some sort of verbal or written warning given beforehand. I completely understand the appeals process and wanting to, make sure that we have proper documentation, for giving the employee every chance to have their due process and go through that. I completely agree, accept that wholeheartedly. I think in this case, Kim, I think you're absolutely right. This goes back to I'm just struggling with the difference between performance pay and just using this as another mechanism to increase our teacher's salary, because I'm just struggling with us, not the connection between, the letter and the file and the due process. That I completely agree with. I think it's, feeling obligated to lower our professional standards in order to pay our teachers more, that I'm struggling with. And that's not something unfortunately our history can fix. I just think that we expect a lot from our teachers because they deliver all the time. And like you said, and out of almost 600 teachers, we have maybe 5 or less than a handful that this even applies to. So above and beyond, our teachers are killing it. So, we're talking about a very few. But with that, I think, part of working here and working in an A+ district and working in a district that strives for excellence, we expect a level of professionalism. And I'm struggling with how we lower this expectation and not create some heartache for us down the road, or even if this doesn't apply to a single person, to vote for something that would, give people 4 different chances to correct their behavior before we're saying it's important enough for us to not give you a bonus, payment. And maybe I'm just looking at it too black and white. I'm not sure of perspective.
So, I do think that we need to take our lawyers' recommendation seriously, and I also think that we need to look at the process of how we get to this level 4, maybe we don't have more levels, we find a way to make it less. Because we have had people out under jurisdiction. So to say that these people who are here are staying here should get this, and they don't have the process of going into that step, and they lose their money. That's really big. Again, this is something we talk to our teachers about. They volunteer position so.
I think, I don't disagree with that at all. I think once we approve this is the process. So if we want to change the process, now is the time to do that. Once we approve this is the process for the year. So I don't disagree that I absolutely need more information from the attorney to understand more about this, because if we tie their performance pay to this based on legal recommendation, which I am with 100%, we would obviously follow. I'm just not understanding. We would have to change the process prior to approving this to make that actually function that way this year.
I will say, just so you guys know, from a disciplinary, this is very common. This is very similar to what I did at GE and healthcare. Your verbal warning usually was informal and not even done. It was like, hey, you got to do this. It's not okay. second written, a final, and then termination. So even though it's written out very, and we wanted to make sure we documented those warnings, this is very common in human resources in general, and Monica probably attest to human resources and employee relations in education. So I just don't want you guys to think like that that's a ton of steps. It can also go over a duration of time. It's not something that's quite clean every year. So just want to make sure.
So, for one thing. So my perspective is, I understand and initially agree with you now. I'm saying that, you know, the whole idea is like, you know, we don't want to lower standards, right? That's sort of what we feel like is happening here. But when Monica explained, what I do like is that the step that actually takes money away, I mean, that's a really big deal. The step that takes money away allows that due process. And, you know, ideally, this never happens ever in our schools, but it gives the opportunity for somebody who maybe just has a conflict or is being, you know, targeted or picked on or whatever, it gives up the power to the teacher to defend themselves. Where steps 1, 2, and 3 really does not have any power to defend themselves. If the power to defend themselves is in step 3, then in my head, that's the perfect way to do it, because then it's kind of keeping the standard where we are, but we're still giving that power to the teacher to defend themselves to unfair treatment. And so the rules right now, without having that power, really, if it's at step 3, they're sort of at the mercy of, you know, and again, I don't think this ideally, you know, ever happens, but again, that's why we have these policies in place to protect our teachers, to protect our standards, and, you know, so Monica's explanation, I think, is very helpful to make me understand sort of, and it makes sense legally too, when you think of it from the perspective, because these rules are not just to protect, you know, the school per se or the theaters, it's to protect our teachers too. So I feel pretty good after thinking about it that way. Again, in the perfect world, we think it's step 3, but again, I think to Jody's point, step 1 is, I would expect fairly formal and you can sort of discount that one.
Elaine, do you have any comments?
I really like what you said about the teacher being able to then protect themselves and following into that suit. You know, what you think is fair. And I'm not always going to say, hey, if you guys think this is good, then let's do it. I promise. I won't. You've seen me do that. But I do like the fact that it does give them the opportunity to protect themselves, because people can get picked on no matter what position they're in. So, you know.
I can agree with that, Tanya. I think you put it really well. I think, you know, protecting the district, protecting the teachers, allowing them a say in that is crucial. I think my issue still with moving forward with this as is this is what we're proving for this year. And who knows, this hasn't been changed in a number of years. It's maybe what we're proving 3 years from now. So I agree absolutely with what you're saying, but in order to in my opinion, make it to make the standard more equal, you would have to, you know, adjust this process to allow that feedback, to allow that appeals process, to allow that due process. That, to me, I completely agree is fair. We probably should have been doing that all along, and probably why our lawyers told us to do that. But I guess my fear is that when we approve this is the process. So we are, in essence, at least to me, lowering that standard because we're not taking the step to change the process and then to approve it based on that. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, but I think by approving this, we're not continuing the standard, we are lowering it to meet the process instead of changing the process to meet the standard. I think it's just a difference in semantics.
Well, I think the overall issue that we're kind of really discussing here is the fact that we're asked to approve this as these being our 3 measures for performance pay, but we weren't asked what we thought those should be. And as the creators, along with Superintendent Jennings and administrators of the strategic plan and how that is going to be executed to all levels of the district, it would have made sense to make sure that these three things are in line with our strategic plan, and it doesn't really sound like they are to me. So I think that's what I'm struggling with most is, are these three measures the best measures that we could and should be using to achieve what we want to achieve in the big picture? And I understand that a lot of work has gone into this and that no one wants to hear that this is what we're going to do. But that puts me in an interesting position when I feel pressure to vote positively for something that I actually don't think is in the best interest of student success.
I think where I'm also getting hung up, I don't disagree with your statement. Where I'm also getting hung up is to the comments before about, the teachers have agreed to this, and we ask for their feedback. I want to honor that, and I do want to honor that. I don't think that by honoring their feedback means that I have to go with them every time. We're allowed to have, just like we are here, we're allowed to have conversations, agreement, and I think, maybe Kim, to your point, that's the part that was missing. So the teachers were presented with something they were allowed to vote, and us as the approving body weren't in that conversation. And so while the teachers did approve it, had there been a conversation or some sort of feedback loop that said, hey, according to our strategic plan or according to maybe some board goals, we would like to adjust this or adjust this. And we don't know what the teachers would have said to that because we didn't give them the opportunity to do it. So I don't discount what they're saying at all. I think I'm glad that they found something that meets all of their criteria. But I don't want to discount that they wouldn't agree with additional criteria that they weren't given the chance to look at it. Okay, we have one more though that we need to go through. So if we want to finish up with that professionalism, let's move on to the school-wide growth. I think Gina touched on this a little bit in terms of the point values and all of that. So I think we have a little bit of understanding of that. Now, we're just looking forward to either conversations or additional questions on school-wide growth versus individual teacher or classroom growth in their performance based on that.
I personally feel like we have limited options this year because of the start of school being in an all-online environment, which is not our norm, and the fact that we could in fact go back to an all-online environment at any point throughout the year, depending on how metrics go. I do feel like definitely we should not penalize individual teachers for that, and so I'm actually in favor this year of utilizing the higher level or higher school-wide, I guess, growth, as opposed to having more weight being on an individual classroom. I under normal circumstances, would not agree with that, but I do feel like we have limited options this year.
Okay. Melissa, any comments or questions?
Okay, I can hear. So I agree, I think we should do this for this year, and then we should definitely think about it for next year. I don't think we should talk about this after next year. Personally, I think the board needs to be looking at all these, whatever the tonight, we should evaluate all of this before the next year, and we have feedback to the community that has to talk about it. That way, they do have some feedback and direction from the board, and they are discussing things and deciding what they want to present as their options.
Okay, thank you. Elaine?
Yes, I'm also in favor of this.
Tanya? Yeah. Thumbs up from down there. Okay. I will say also, I think I agree across the board. This is a year like none other, and I think we are still using our student data, and I know that a lot of
teachers, administrators, groups have gotten together and are utilizing sort of training and best practices and just doing everything we can to work as a team. So I do really feel like this year more than any other, that grade level school-wide growth information will represent the work of the team versus the work of the individual that can be part of this year. So I think it does have enough, obviously, incentive for teachers to do their best and make use of obviously all the at their disposal, but distance learning, going back and forth and hybrid and all of that, not being able to even have a probably true assessment as of yet, or already fourth week of school or whatever. Yeah, I think it presents unique challenges that this helps us avoid for sure. So totally agree. Okay, so now we will circle back. We've gone through the professional development, the professionalism, and school-wide growth, and had some comments or questions. Before we move to vote, are there any final comments or suggestions or questions? The only portion that has the caveat of for this year is the third standard, is the third number 3. The other 2 are a permanent sort of deal. I think we approve this for this year, and we will have the opportunity to approve potentially something different next year. Gina, correct that, or give me that timeline of how it works.
Yes, this comes to you guys every year for approval, and so we will take all of your feedback and everything, some more, maybe we can have more conversations about this back to the committee to rework things for next year to what you said for approval of the sign. Thank you for all that feedback.
So just to clarify, I think the point of distinction earlier is that we hadn't made any modifications to performance pay in a number of years, but it does come to us to review. We just hadn't had any need to change it for years, so I think that's why we were in for statute that has to go to vote from the teacher. It was driven as the 301 was driven to be where you had major teacher input in regards to what the structure was like. So that was the underlying ultimate goal of that. And that's why we kind of, when we talked about, we knew this in the way of saying we're looking at all the different options. So that's when we took all of those options out. Now, even at the time when we were going through the process, I think of career development and determining the number of hours, you're already in part of the school year and have already done a lot of training and looking at what some of those other districts and opportunities that they have. So I still believe it keeps everything at a very high level, and then I think cleaning things up, you get attorney recommendations is another piece that I think lowers an expectation or lowers the standard. So if we get input in the future, we would want to know, do you not want, so things to ponder, I guess. No professionalism, that doesn't have to be a goal, doesn't have to be one at all. I will tell you in historical perspective, when I was on the committee as a certified teacher, we felt that someone who was disciplined at a high level should not receive loans. That was something that we felt as teachers. But that doesn't have to be in there, nor does attendance and graph be in there, or professional development, those kind of things. So you can have different options that you present to the teachers. So just kind of comment those things. Things that what you possibly want to send to them.
Does there only have to be 3 things, or there can be like 5 different things, or we've just historically done 3?
Maybe I mean, it could be 1 thing or 5 things, and there's not a minimum number.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see each of those things clearly tied to our strategic plan. I mean, I'm not saying that these aren't, or there isn't some way you could tie these to them, but I would love to see the strategic plan driving these performance measures versus history driving these performance measures.
Agreed. I think we've done good over the last year or 2, sort of incorporating every sort of piece of our district with the strategic plans. I think now that this was sort of a odd year to have to make, massive changes to this, but I think it was necessary, obviously, with the attendance piece and everything moving forward. So I think that's yet another piece we'll have to integrate with the strategic plan. So just in a brief recap, again, what we're voting on right now are the changes to the performance pay award. So from attendance to professional development hours, it's 15 for teachers and 21 for administrators. The professionalism standard changing from letter of directive to letter of reprimand, and the school-wide growth, or the growth coefficient changing from a percentage of individual teacher growth, classroom growth to wholly school-wide growth. Is that correct? In saying that growth. So instead of being partially teacher and school, it's just all. There's a movement. Okay. So anyway, there's not any other last comments or questions. I will just say, I think I'm appreciative of the work that was done into this, not only from the committee that did the work, but all the teachers that took the survey, and the teachers that thought about it, and the district that researched what other districts are doing and what teachers might want. I think this is a very difficult process because I think everyone is in the mindset of wanting to make sure teachers are paid what they're worth, and you don't have enough money in your budget to do that on a yearly basis. So I hear us vacillating between, is this truly merit-based performance pay, bonus structure, or can we just create attainable goals, but yet that we could have the most people get them, which isn't necessarily the bonus structure in the traditional sense. So I do feel like as a board, we're still grappling with what that means, and this year probably wasn't the year to take on something this heavy when we know there's a lot of changes. We know there's a lot of things going on this time. Unfortunately, we needed to because of the attendance piece, and I think we all agree why that needs to change. So I would say that I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I don't wholeheartedly support this only because I feel like we're at the top of our game. We're Litchfield Elementary School District. Like that means something to me. That means something to our teachers. We have amazing teacher retention. We have amazing PD hours. We are the top of the heap. And I want to keep pushing forward. And I think that setting high expectations for our teachers that are 100% attainable is the way that we do that, no matter whether it's this year or any other year. So this in no way says I don't believe in our teachers, I don't value them, I don't want to pay them 10 times what they're worth, because I do, and I wish that we could. I just don't think this is the way to do it. So, any other last comments or questions before we move to it? If not, I'll open the floor to motion.
I motion.
Nope. Okay, let's keep chatting.
I motion to approve the career development and performance compensation plan 2020-2021 with changes to performance pay awards for 2020-2021.
Second. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. I just want to make sure I heard that right. Elaine, Tom, and Melissa. All voted in the affirmative? Correct. And, okay, thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to 2B, fiscal year 2021 consolidated career plan. And then we will use them.
Tonight, I'd like to start with just an overview of the Proposition 301 fund, and otherwise we can look at classroom site. So back in 1999, Governor Hall and her staff forecasted a downturn in the economy, and they wanted to create a way for funding for school districts that were outside the normal budget allocation. So Governor Hall tried that during the normal legislative time period, but everyone tried to throw other people in the and she wanted it to just be for education. So in June, she called a special session and presented Senate Bill 1007. proposition, the main thing that it did was create 0.6% sales tax that would go just for public education. So in November 2000, 53% of Arizona voters approved the ballot initiative, and it passed in only 3 of 15 counties, Maricopa, Pima, and Pinal. So the funding was to be used for several items. And I've heard this referred to as the cascading or the waterfall. So it has to fill each of these buckets before it goes down to the next one. So the first thing was students' first debt. Back in late 90s, early 2000s, the school facilities board went around the entire state and looked at every single school facility and found schools that were deficient in their new standards. So they issued around $800 million of debt to be able to upgrade all of those facilities. So the first thing was to be able to pay that debt. Once that year's debt was paid, then it goes to universities and community colleges. Universities was for technology and research, and community college was for workforce. Once it overflows again into tribal colleges, and they were to also create programs to increase the working programs. The next is Arizona Department of Education. With Prop 301, it changed the number of school days from 175 to 180. So each year, we added 1 school day to our calendar, and that continues to be funded from these sales tax funds. ADE also created school safe programs, character ed, school accountability, and some failing school tutoring funds. The next step that would go to would be any funds left go to an income tax credit that was to help the lower class income earners to pay this tax, the income sales tax. And the last bucket in there is the classroom site funds. So any funds that were left from the sales tax all falls into that last bucket. So Proposition 301 requires school districts in K-12 to put these funds into 3 buckets. 20% is required to go into base pay increases. The next 40% is for performance pay, which is just been discussing. And then the last 40% could be used for any options such as aims intervention, class size reduction, dropout prevention, teacher compensation, teacher development, and teacher liability insurance. Some other provisions that were in 301, even though they aren't fully funded by sales tax, they still are required from 2000 to 2021. So they must pay for 2001 and 2 through 2005, 6, a 2% increase. So no matter what the inflation did, we were guaranteed at least 2%. After that time, we were to be adjusted by 2% of the, either 2% or the lesser of gross domestic product. So we did it. For the first couple of years, it was nice. You knew you could always budget and have 2%. But then slowly it did decline. The state auditor general is required to produce the spending reports. So each March, we get a report that has our classroom spending. That was required by 301. And then also, as I mentioned before, the tax credit to ensure the low-income individuals and families were not unduly penalized by the tax. Another provision that I'd forgotten about until I started thinking about what we did tonight was we used to have a add-on to our M&O budget for excess utilities. And so that was if our utility costs were higher than the expected amount by the state formula, we could levy a tax on our taxpayers. And that's how we used to pay for all the ball field lights and extra water we did on our fields. Proposition 301 took that away. It wrote into statute that it would be phased out in 2009. That was one downside of 301. So if this was not extended, it would expire this year, 2021 year. But in March of 2018, Governor Ducey signed Senate Bill 1390, which was a bipartisan legislation, and it extends it for another 20 years. So this will funds should be available through 2041. However, since this was not voter approved, it has lost its voter protection. So it is in statute, the amount and how it's calculated, but the legislatures can now go in and modify that. So I just want to talk a little bit about the amount that we expect to receive each year and how it fluctuates. So in March, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee releases an estimate for the following school year. So if you think about this, they aren't even halfway through the tax collection of the current year, and they're projecting what's going to come in starting July for the following year. So it is an estimate for the, they provide us the estimates, and then we use that to determine our budget amounts for the classroom cycle. When Proposition 301 originally started, it was a cash control fund. So it made it really difficult when the state was saying you're supposed to use it for base pay, but we had no idea how much cash. So they did change it to a budget control fund. And over the first 9 or 10 years, the estimate was made without considering what had happened in the past. So in the past, they'd levy enough that you can budget this and the cash would come in lower. And the next year they say, we'll go ahead and budget this and the cash comes in lower. So over the years, districts ran into cash issues because they kept committing the entire budget amount of cash. So in 2011, they changed their projections and they included that cash shortage. So you'll see a big drop in the budget amount in that year. So the total revenues is going to fluctuate with the economy and also on our prior year's student counts. So when we look at the revenues, when the program first started, it's $275 per weighted student. So it dipped a little bit and made it up to $401. Went down a little bit, and then in the year of the correction, we were down to $125. So it dipped by about 70%. Stayed that way for a couple of years, and then it started to bounce back up, a little over 300, gone up and down. It was up to 434 last year. So in March, we were trying to issue contracts, and the estimate was not out yet from the JBLP. But based on past, I had increased, I took the current year amount that we've been using for 2019, 2020, and added the $40, which was supposed to be, and help pay the increase for teachers for the 20 by 20. And that $40 was coming from that first pot. That debt had been paid off. So that money was supposed to keep filtering down. In the estimate that came out, they came down to $425. So actually lower than our prior. So when we've been given the amount per student, and I calculate the amount for the budget that's available for teacher pay and the related payroll tax. So there is a delay when the state taxes are collected by the purchaser versus when the district receives the money. So if you think about it, you're paying at a store, you pay your sales tax. That money doesn't go to the state till the end of the month. The state then calculates how much goes back to the district. So it's a couple months delay of when it's collected versus when you receive it. But yet we're paying teachers out by the end of May, well, throughout the school year for 2 of the pot, and then by the end of May, early June. So we don't really have all of the money collected. So when I budget, I only consider 82% of the projection. But then I add back in half of the prior year's fund balance or funds of cash that's left. I add back in half of that. Again, half left out just to give the buffer. And then prior to 2009-10, in that third pot of money, the third bucket of 40%, our schools were allocated funds for them to determine if they want to do professional development, hire maybe additional aid, something like that. So 9-10 was the recession, along with that big dip you saw for correcting the amount that was really available in district funds. And so at that point, we took away that option for schools and it was added to teacher pay. Then in 2014, 2015, we were starting to do a little better. So we looked at other options, and an instructional assistant was added for each school to provide either math or reading intervention. So once I take that away from the amount available, I divide the net amount available by the number of estimated teachers. And that's how I get to how much teachers receive. So if we look at the base pay and performance pay over the years, the first line, you can see back when it first started, it was maybe $1,500 between all of the pots. Over the years, it's gone up and down a little bit, but now we're just $9,000 between base pay, the performance pay, and the 301 units. So you do see a little bit of dip right there in that 10, 11, 12, 13 year. But we were able, for the most part, to keep those funds higher. I believe they dipped maybe, I think I heard 27 and 30% versus the funding level dropped 70%. Do you have any questions?
Sorry, I have
Go
a question.
ahead. No, that's fine.
So you know, you said that you take half of what was left over and you average that into the rest of the other half. Does that go into the rainy day fund? Do you keep that in because it's not really part of their option?
No, it stays specifically in these funds and reserved for teacher pay. But that idea is just to try to keep a reserve, so like when you're like, you're in hit next year,
They can only apply to that.
right, it's reserved for that purpose. But it just gives us another little piece that we can decide if we need to use it or continue. And also back, it wasn't until 2018 that they reauthorized. So until that point, I was kind of planning of how do you phase off of this? If it completely went away, how do you do that? So trying to leave some funds in there for maybe pay out half of it that year would have been away.
This is the federal standard or does every state kind of do their own thing?
This is a state level.
Just the state, right? Well, I didn't know if, I mean, federal is not there. Is this a common practice throughout our country in all of our states?
As far as what I heard, I've researched a lot, is Arizona is very unique in all of our funding formulas.
I was just wondering if there was an
It's not-
average that would showcase how little we are getting versus other people. So
No, other than if you just look at overall, we're ranked what, 49 or 50 right now. You're welcome.
Unfortunately, the reason that 301 and such things exist is because the funding formula is so poorly designed. That's an opinion. But, so yeah, I think other states don't have things like this. I think other states don't have things as complex as this because their basic school funding formula, they do it at a higher percentage. And so they don't need to create additional pots of money to pay teachers because they just pay them based out of, the general fund. It was originally designed, but here in Arizona, we just like to do things a little different. Wendy, so if I'm understanding, I know that initially when we created these amounts in March, or when we told everyone in March, things have changed since then. Tell me again, I know that we've had this conversation, but it's been a while now. Tell me, because we've already put forth that number, we have the money in the account from what I'll call rollover funds from before. So just to be really clear, we don't actually have this much money this year. This is including funds from the previous balance. Correct. Correct. So next year, when these funds are reduced, most likely, because we're going to have less money next year than we actually have this year, we won't have the same rollover amount that we had from last year, this year, from this year to next year. Just to sort of be planning for the future, this will be most likely be decreased next year unless there is some massive change to our state budget.
Okay. And then also with our loss of enrollment, since it's is based on this year's student numbers will be used for next year's amount. And not only the loss of enrollment, but also the funding level being at 95% for distance learning. That will also affect next year.
So next year is just going to be volatile as well. So we would anticipate, like you said, because of lower student enrollment, because of lower revenues from the state, this fund will decrease. We will have less rollover next year. So while we're able to maintain these this year because we conservatively, budgeted from last year, and we will roll it over, we will, this will most definitely be reduced next year. So, okay. Comments?
Yes, I would just like to say thank you, Wendy, for such a thorough presentation. I really appreciate all the history. Everyone else might not, but I really do, so thank you for that. My questions are, well, I just want to do one point of clarification first, kind of to piggyback off what Danielle said. So as a bystander, you might say, okay, if we know we're going to have less money next year, why don't we try to smooth it out and give less money in the fiscal year 2021? But our hands are tied with that because number one, those are the amounts that were in contracts that we issued, correct? And number two, we do have the funds in there because of the rollover fund. So if we were totally out of money, we could at this point reduce those 2021 numbers, maybe back to what they were in 2020 or a different number. But the numbers that we have for 2021, we have to move forward with, even though we know 2022 is going to take a hit. Okay. If you had to guess, and I know you don't like guessing, but if you had to guess, do you think 2022 will be like 80% of what 2021 is, or what? Just a guess. We'll not hold you to it, but
My guess would be about
66.
so I asked that question because I wanted to make sure that number one, the teacher's going to have that in their mind, that's going to be where this is going. And then will we have those numbers before we issue contracts next year to reflect on the contracts that we're actually going to be getting? Or how can we correct that timing between the two? Historically, I know we've done a great job on the estimates, but this year took you by surprise, and it's by no fault of your own. But I just want to know how we can avoid that next year.
So we could delay issuing the contracts a little bit, or the estimate may actually be about sooner. Remember, this year it was delayed with COVID, but the majority of the reason it's going down next year isn't just this adjustment. This adjustment actually is really small. The big difference is our enrollment. When we're looking at our 40-day number, if students don't return and our 100-day number goes up, that's really where the difference is. If this would have been a normal year, this would have been just a little blip of having August and then time. It's going to be the enrollment.
And also, my memory serves me correctly, one of the reasons we did these contracts early, if I recall, is so that we can snap up the good teachers early, right? Because I remember quite a few discussions about making these estimations so that we can offer contracts and get people under contract before then someone else can, right?
Right. And one other option might be to issue the contract without that amount, but then teachers are going to be bigger.
Is it possible to provide a very conservative estimate in the contract and increase it? I mean, I know we can't decrease it if we have the money, but can we increase it?
You can't increase as long as you increase it before July 1st of the new school year.
And we would have a better estimate prior to July 1st, right? Okay, so we could next year, knowing that we might, depending on enrollment, obviously, we may have a steeper hill going down. We could provide a very conservative estimate in February or March, and then revise that prior to July and potentially increase. Right, rather than, promising something we can deliver, although, just don't know what we don't know.
And normally there is a better estimate by the time we're officially.
Yeah, well, I would suspect next year will probably be a very similar.
And we would have the 100th day, where now I'm going by the 40th day number, so we will have the 100th day, so we'll be able to get closer to the amount.
Okay, so explain just really quick, I know this year the 40th day, it's different, we don't typically use that, so tell me the difference between, I mean, in this instance in particular, the 40th day and the 100th day.
So generally between the 40th and the 100th day, we see student growth, still we still see students coming in. And so the average daily membership is based on the number of days the students are enrolled. So if a student came in on day 51, we're going to get half of the funding for that child. So the sooner they come in, the more funding we receive for APM. But until you actually hit the 100th day, I have no idea what our average daily membership is. But it should be higher than that.
I'd like to say something about that real fast. To Kim's point, yes, thank you for the history lesson. I like it as well. Obviously, everybody else out there. 66% is a little more like precise than I was expecting for sure. Or thinking, oh, 70, you know, but we like what you do very, very much. I mean, my mic was really high. While we're on the subject of open enrollment between 40 and 100, so for those families that are out there who, for whatever reason, had to pull out of our district because we weren't open, maybe there was another school that had opened, you felt it necessary to move them to a different platform. I think one thing that I would really like to stress to our community is that we need you. We need you the way you need us. We are all here, all of our teachers, all of our staff, all of our administration. That's what this is about, is teaching the kids in our community. And without the committed kids, our community is going to suffer. So please, if you're thinking about coming back soon.
Thank you for the PSA, yeah, we need it. We all need that word. Okay, great, thank you very much. Oh,
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. It's not a question. It's a reiteration because I really like to reiterate things. So I just want to say the numbers out loud. So for fiscal year 2021, our teachers are potentially getting $9,000 from 301, Prop 301 funds. From what we think is going to happen for fiscal year 2022, that's going to decrease to $6,000. So that's a $3,000 decrease in teacher pay. I just wanted to say those numbers. Thanks.
I remember that like the most, hopefully most conservative.
And if everybody comes back, that's really hot.
But I do think it's important to state the situation as it stands today, because that is what it is, and I think we all are shocked and dismayed by this, but we also don't want to come back in March when he says, okay, so here's the number, and we are sort of living in la la land that we're going to be back up to normal numbers when, clearly, even at a conservative number of 66%, we're going to be disappointed, right? That's not going to live up to the standard we were looking for. So, absolutely. Okay. So thank you, Wendy, for the presentation and the history lesson. Always good to reiterate that because we ask you the same questions just about every year, because 364 days from now, we will probably ask you the same questions because we don't live and breathe this like you do. So thank you for giving us that grace. Appreciate it. Okay, so I will entertain a motion for the 2021 performance award. No, excuse me, consolidated 301.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2021 consolidated 301 plan. I second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving to 2C on the agenda, we are at 2021 performance award plan revised. I know you're thinking that we've already done this, and we have, but Monica, if you'd like to come up and present, this is kind of a continuation of 2A on our agenda. Yeah, so as a result of the first item being presented, this is a document that's a published document, so we would have to accurately reflect those changes. So for certified staff, we would reflect 15 administrators, we would, for principals, we would change the attendance from attendance to professional development hours of 18 hours needed to be met by May 31st. And 12-month administrators would have also 21 hours, would have 21 hours. So that's a little bit more than our principals. And another item on this, another item I need to present is that we identify in our assessment staff evaluation forms, there is a section for personnel use only that currently reflects attendance reduction. So we need to modify that from attendance reduction to performance award level reduction. So those are the only changes to this document.
Okay, I have a question. I see the changes reflected, they make sense. Why are the other two components not included on here in terms of the professionalism and the school growth? Are they all rolled up into this, right? Into this performance pay?
So the professionalism, that information is represented in the certified placement charts. However, on page 2 of the document, you do see the amounts that reflect the performance award monies that impact professional. There's just no reference to that information specifically.
Okay, is there a reason that it's not referenced there? Or?
So, I mean, when you look at the paragraph, so that would be the 3 goals.
We're on, just to make sure I'm in the same place. So we're on page 2. In the middle, you see the levels and the goals and with the dollar figures there, and then you're referencing the paragraph underneath.
So you can see the illustrated amounts of 3 goals, 2 goals, 1 goal. And it's just basically generally stated what the amounts are. But no other areas were touched except for the attendance reduction area, which was changed to professional development hours. But if you're asking like, why is there a reflection of like professionalism goal, we just don't have that detail on there, but we do have it on the placement charts. We could consider making it more detail on this document.
Okay, I didn't know if there was just a reason why you only highlighted one versus the others, or, you know, I didn't know that it was someplace else. So I'm just wondering, you didn't have the goals and all the monetary adjustments there. So just didn't know if there was a reason why.
Yeah, we can add that to distinguish that a little more clearer. I don't think the other money wouldn't be changes to it necessarily, but to the other components, just a question.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so this is basically approving the changes that were just approved, item 2A, and basically putting it into a document format that will then be posted for all staff. Actually, it might be on our website, so maybe all can see, I'm not sure, but okay. I will entertain a motion.
Let's see if this is cool. I motion to approve the 2020-21 performance award plan revised. I second.
Right. Any other comments, suggestions, questions? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nay. I think I was the only one else. Correct. Yes. Okay. Moving on to 2D, governing board goals for 2021 school year, and that is me. I'm just going to take a quick, because we're moving on after this to our board goal number 4. I just want to do a really quick recap on the other 3 goals, where we are, and then we'll just slide right into governing board goal number 4. Just as a quick, I had to go back and look because I couldn't remember which goal was with which number. So I'm just going to do a very quick overview. Governing board goal number 1 is that we will complete a self-evaluation and identify governing board goals. That has been completed, so we are 25% there. Number 2, with the governing board will create an annual calendar to review key reports and progress towards those board goals. This process has already begun. We have 2 board members that will be working on this later this month, and we'll be bringing a first read of that to our November board meeting. So that is in progress. We'll have a first read in November, second read, and potential approval in December. So we will have that one done also by the end of this year, hopefully. Board goal number 3 was to create minimum requirements for presentations and reports given by district staff to the governing board. We approved that at the last meeting, so that was into effect on October 1st. And that one is complete. Now, any questions before I move on in terms of where we stand with the board goals? Board goal number 4, I'll just recap really quick and then we'll move into what we're going to do with that. Was for the governing board to execute at least 2 new strategies to share and receive information and feedback with external stakeholders. We talked a bit about some of the strategies, but didn't commit to any during the board retreat over the summer. So we have not begun that process yet. We will do that tonight, with that concluding obviously by the end of the year next year. Okay. Any questions or feedback on the board goals?
No, but I do want us to kind of address why we're doing these board goals, because there's some stuff out there about how our board goals maybe don't align to success, and I think that we should, as a board, address that, because all of us up here, our number 1 goal, why we're here, is for our students to be successful, and every decision we make, we are thinking about if there's the best interest of the students in our district. So I just thought maybe we could talk about that while we're talking about our goals.
Okay, sure. I'm not going to be sad at it, but anyone else wants to? Okay. I think the board convened in a board retreat over the summer and decided that we had painstakingly gone through the process with Superintendent Gunning, the district staff, even brought in a third party to help us work through the strategic plan. That was 2 years ago, and when that process started. It took us a while. We convened study sessions, we had surveys, we had many different strategies to collect feedback from the staff and the students, I believe, as well as community members, parents, etc. Throughout that process, the board realized that there could be and probably should be a difference between the goals at the board level and the goals at the district level. As a board, we are responsible, obviously, for some very important decision making, but we're also kind of a team of people that have very unique jobs that don't actually get to interact very often with each other. And in fact, only in these meetings do we get to interact with each other. So setting very clear goals, responsibilities, norms was important to us because we didn't have those set beforehand. And I want to be clear from my personal view of the role of the governing board. Our role is not to educate students. That's not what we're here to do. Our experiences in higher education, most of us outside of the land are not educators, and that's not what we do. That is the district's responsibility to educate students. Our responsibility is to be a team that collaborates with the district, provides budget and resource approval when they need it and when they request it, and provide oversight and strategic guidance in the form of a plan and things like that to our superintendent to make sure that those overall goals are being met. I don't want to speak for the board so anyone else can jump in, but while our first priority is always what is best for students, we do not make daily decisions on how the students are educated. We don't manage the district, we don't manage those day-to-day operations for teachers or administrators or anything like that, as that really isn't the function of what the board should do. So our goals really represent what we want to do as a group, as an organization, and our role in moving this organization forward in the future, looking 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and making sure the group that sits up on this dais is connected and strategic in our thought and able to move together as a team and identify potential problems, potential pitfalls, and then be able to create
create solutions based on the goals and objectives we have set for ourselves. Additional comments? Right. I've been doing a lot of board goals, so don't worry, I got a lot more of that action for you coming. So yeah, I think they're very important. I mean, I think that in most every professional occupation, education being one of them, you know, we expect our students to have individual goals for themselves. We expect teachers to have them, and administrators to evaluate them based on their goals every year. I think the board should be held to that exact same standard. If we expect high expectations from the staff members of this district, we need to expect those same expectations of ourselves, which is how we got here. Okay, so that's kind of the update and your review of where we are right now. Moving on to item 2B in terms of governing board goal number 4 specifically. In the process of creating these SMART goals, we did some action planning, and we walked through a few action steps of what we wanted to do in terms of developing these potential strategies. I'm going to walk through them in light speed. We don't really need to go through them individually, and then we can get into the meat of this in terms of determining what some of the strategies might be. First is what we're doing right now is discussing potential strategies for the board to share and receive feedback from external stakeholders. We're going to determine the timeline for strategy line, each of the strategies, and what that best timeline is to deploy those. Then obviously we'll move into execution. We will review feedback from the first exchange of ideas and make any necessary adjustments before we move on to that second strategy. We will then execute strategy 2, again, review feedback, developing best practices moving forward. Hopefully we'll continue these strategies, you know, next year and then year on, even if we do change a little bit from year to year. So even though we work to collect feedback and provide opportunities for various voices to be heard, I think we saw a need or felt a need for some very specific, identifying very specific ways of sharing with their stakeholders through this process for us to do that over the next, you know, 6 or so months of the school year. So I'll open the floor now to conversation in terms of what some of those strategies might be, the need for them. Obviously, you know, we can move on to timing and stuff after that, but you know, just I'll open the floor to share some of your comments on why, not only why you think this is important, but ways that you think might be helpful to the board and to our constituents that are, you know, looking for ways not only to give us their feedback, but receive feedback directly from us, which we typically haven't done to this point, other than in this meeting.
I will start. I passed out this little packet of papers here, and there's a couple of quotes on here that I would like to highlight. The first page is from the National School Public Relations Association, and in this portion of their document, they say, smart school boards recognize that student achievement and school success depend on collaborating with and actively involving families and the community. Part of being accountable to your public is taking responsibility for creating opportunities for all stakeholders to engage with your district in meaningful ways that allow them to have a voice in important decisions affecting students. It then goes on to say, in many cases, we have found that the public was invited into the process too late to have an authentic voice, causing them to question if their input was valued. In some cases, participants felt the district did not fully embrace parents and staff as partners in the education process. I think we've all gotten feedback that says that could be true in our district. And then it goes on to say, to create a true culture of engagement, boards must bring stakeholders together, not just to give their input on issues, but to expand the conversation. The key to success is making the commitment to listening, taking action based on the information that you're disclosing, and closing the loop by keeping the public informed each step along the way. For me, the 2 takeaways from this particular document were, not only do we need to speak and communicate out to the public what sort of decisions are coming down the pipe, like a new school opening or boundary changes, but also we need to actually listen and give opportunities for them to provide feedback, not just teacher surveys, not just student surveys, but also some sort of community feedback, potentially in the form of a survey or not. The second page, I don't have the source on here, is an article that I found on, there's 7 different ways here on how some successful school systems have communicated with their diverse audiences in their communities. I personally like number 6, present. I think making presentations that would be repeatable, whether that's through a video format or on the website or something, positive stories that then could highlight some of our successes, and or educate on some of our processes would be fantastic. I also think a survey potentially is an option there, and as we discussed in our retreat, potentially a town hall type environment where we can both speak and listen. And then the last page is really just it's not 100% relevant to this, but it's just kind of some tips and tricks that board members can do to lose confidence. That is part of our role as being board members, is to represent this district and hopefully lose public confidence. One of the things I liked on this list in particular was the tip to tell 10 success stories for every criticism you hear or share. And I think that would be extremely useful during this time that we're currently in. So to summarize, speak and listen as much as the opportunities. Since we have 2 action items specifically on this board goal, I think we should have 1 for speaking and 1 for listening, or the opportunity for both.
I agree. I like the idea of, I mean, if we can find one strategy that allows us to do both, like a 4-hour or something like that, I think that's awesome. But we should definitely look at that. I do think it's important, as I was really thinking about this for tonight and thinking about how do we help people understand what we do, how we make decisions, why we make decisions, what information is available. I thought back to my own experience prior to coming on board. And, you know, it's easy to sit up here because I know how it all works now. Sitting in the seat of a constituent or a parent or a community member, I didn't always understand that. And so I think that, to me, that would be a really good opportunity. And Kim, I love what you said about kind of presenting or creating this compelling presentation. I literally almost the exact same notes, although I didn't have any fancy people telling me that I was correct. So now I'm feeling vindicated, which is nice. Creating some sort of communication, whether it's a video series or something like that, that can, you make it once, you just use it for efficiency, about what the board is doing, right? Where to find agendas on our website? How do you get involved in board meetings? What topics are actually covered by the board? How often do we meet? I think we take for granted that everybody just knows those things, and they don't. And the process, while we just actually get a new website that's updated, it's beautiful, it's great. I still think we probably could do something like that where we actually tell people, here's how you get involved, here's how you do that. Again, I think we think that we say that a lot, but for someone who doesn't understand the process at all, maybe we could clarify or reduce the amount of pieces of information that they have to get through to people to participate with us.
I think this is the perfect time when we have so many people watching us. Most of the community care less about government board, and now it's right there when we all the time. So while we have no life on us, we should be taking advantage of it and educating them on what we do. So if there's reasons that might be right, have a way where we can have our conversation with people. It's not just us talking to them or talking to us, but us being able to really have that human conversation.
Yeah, so, I love the idea of something on the website, maybe a question and answer form. And then if each one of us can do a video snippet and a template, which we're discussing. Also, as a liaison for the foundation, I know that they were planning on doing a town hall for the candidates that are running. And I can ask them on that call if they would be interested in hosting the town hall just for a general town hall of the board, and they seem pretty receptive to that. So
That's great. Very good. Yeah, I really love the town hall. I think it's very, with that give and take
electronic things are not, they're where we are now, but they are clearly not optimum. I think the town hall is going to allow a lot more of that back and forth feedback because, you think about how text can be misinterpreted, right? So one of my rules with some of the digital things is that opening for misinterpretation. So I really love the town hall idea. The other thing is we might even consider on our website doing like an FAQ, section where it's just basically, what are the laws? Why are you not allowed to just come up and say whatever you want? Some of that structure that we're bound to, having that just write the rest of our stuff on our website, so the foundation, people can understand, why we can't just kind of do whatever we want.
Why we all can't be a part of the same time.
Right, exactly. Some of these legal things that we're restrained by. So, or just the structure, some of those things. How often do we meet? How do we get involved? I think that could be in one place in 10 to 15 questions.
Okay, so I think we're in agreement on the big things here. So as Kim mentioned before, we can do one of two ways. We can create a structure where we say we want one initiative where we're providing information out about what we do, things like that, and we can work through what that might look like. And then the second one, it sounds like everybody's moving towards some type of forum or town hall or question and answer session where maybe a live sort of question and answer back and forth. Let's tackle that one first because that one seems to be pretty concrete and easy to discern. Moving on to timing, obviously, I know the format is just a disaster right now because everyone's still online and we're really not able to host a lot of people here. So in terms of timing, is it something that we recommend potentially moving to the spring? Because we would potentially, I don't know, be able to have more people in attendance. Is it something that we want sooner than later? And we just create, we've done a couple different times now, sort of a virtual forum or system where we can get as many people as our let's do that, or do local sessions if we had to, and do it virtually. What's kind of the consensus in terms of timing on that?
I prefer in person, to be honest. Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and I'm there. It's not going to get any better, I don't think. So I don't want to push this off, but if we can try to push it off with the potential possibility of doing something that we actually can connect with people and look them in their eyes, I would really appreciate that. And then we could always do plan B if we get to March or whatever. If we say, okay, we can't do it in person, let's just go ahead and do something.
Right, I see what you're saying, right, kind of default back to the Zoom meeting or whatever. How does everybody else feel like that? Pushing it to spring, so let's say maybe the first quarter of 2021. Okay. Okay, so we have a little bit of time on that, but we'll determine the timeline and figure out what that will be. We'll just call that strategy number one. In terms of strategy number two, I think we have a couple of different options. This one would be more focused on communicating out what the board is doing. Another thing that I saw, I don't think this covers it completely, but another thing that I saw on a school board's website in the Valley, which I thought was really interesting. They do, some have done monthly, some have done quarterly, basically like a letter from the board. So it's what are we highlighting for the month or for the quarter? It could be from the board president. We could rotate, every month. Someone takes 1 month. It's very high level. It's not down in the weeds or anything like that. But it's just what's coming up for the month. If there's a study session or there's something that might be important on the agenda that's not a typical meeting that people would expect. You might say that there. Talk about things that we're planning or things that are coming up. Super easy way we can do that, kind of a couple weeks prior. So that might be a really easy way that we can communicate with folks on top of some of the other ways to get the message out about what we're doing and connect with people more in these meetings. Thoughts, ideas on that?
So are you suggesting that for strategy?
I'm maybe suggesting that as like a 2A, like maybe that is part of, if we did some sort of, as you mentioned, like a video series or something where we talk about the role of the governing board and how to interact with us a little bit more, whether it's kind of on your agenda, where the reading themes are, kind of like a 101, right, basic stuff. To me, that can just be part of that. I don't think that's enough of a strategy on its own. I think that's part of a greater.
So that would be a tool we would use in our just general public
Communication plan, right?
So is it something that you're thinking we could ask the community to send us questions that they may have about what the board does, how things work, maybe run for on the board, and maybe do like a board tour where on the video you can answer questions. Post that on the website. So Richard, is that interesting?
I wasn't saying that, but that's not, I mean, I wasn't saying in terms of that, and I like that idea of incorporating even additional feedback in terms of, being able to ask questions. I was thinking more just, this is the board, this is how it works. These are where you can find details about what we do in our agenda. I mean, I think that's probably the number one question that people ask is, how do I find the agenda? How do I get to that website? It's not that difficult. Our website now is much easier than the old one. But I think it's top of mind for us. It's not top of mind for, every people, because, we typically only meet once a month. Now that people are more interested in the decisions that are being made here, just to make that easier. So I think sort of maybe a strategy 2 is creating a communication plan. We have 3 components of that. One would be a monthly or quarterly letter. 2 could be this, I keep calling it a video series. I don't know what it would look like actually, but a series of videos that might say, hey, if you want this, or it literally could be a walkthrough of our website and how to get. You click on this, you click on this, you click on this, and post that to our YouTube channel. I think so many people would be thankful for that. That's Stevie, I think, is giving us a big nod. Yeah, thumbs up. Thank you, Stevie. See, no one can see you, so they don't know what you're really saying.
And I think that's a great idea. It's a tour kind of.
Yeah.
Of everything that comes to our mind.
Yeah. Any other, I said 3 components, now I listed 2. I don't know if I didn't have another good idea or if not, but Steve can remind me of that. Anything else you want to ask?
Well, I like Tanya's idea of the FAQs kind of to supplement that. There might be some things that we don't make a video out of, but we feel like should be stated somewhere. And so maybe we really are more strategic in what we put in a video format versus what we put in an FAQ type format on the website.
We could do some fun where a board member interviewed somebody from district office. Mindy, and they're excited. I'm going to interview you. I'm not too.
Sorry for my pause. I'm just making notes. So continue to talk.
And I do think what's also important with this is to work with Shelley Hornback and make sure that we are in agreement with the overall district communication plan and that we are mirroring all those things and that we're working with that plan and not doing our own thing.
Agreed. And Shelley's having a great application. She was on the call.
And I'll say as a side note, it's already bothering me that our action plans and goals are not in gold and as the rest. Presentations are. Yeah, our action plans, we're not following our own protocol, having our own presentations looking in standardized format. Do we have to follow that same rule?
Oh, yeah, this is actually ASBA format, so I don't think, this wasn't really a presentation for that. I'll work on that for this communication plan. I'm on it. Yep. Okay, so let me just recap really quickly so that we can move on. And we don't have to
solidify everything today. I mean, to Kim's point, obviously, it's just the five of us talking up here. We're actually not going to be the ones that execute every single piece of this. So there's going to be a lot of collaboration and discussion with the district, how that works, what's possible, what's not. So, these are ideas right now that will have to be fleshed out with the people that are going to help make this happen for sure. But strategy number one is a potential town hall forum, sort of question and answer session with the board in the spring of 2021. If we get to, let's say February, and things are not looking good, we will schedule that for some sort of electronic Zoom presentation. We'll work through those details. Strategy number two, or these could be flip-flopped actually, just because I think this communication plan will come first. But basically an external communication plan for our constituents about what the board does. This could consist of a board letter where either I write it or we rotate it on a monthly basis. A video series or something like that for a basic walkthrough of where to find things pertaining to the board and how to connect with us or how to engage with us. And the FAQ on the website. I know our website now has an FAQ section, as part of our COVID stuff and potentially even just a general district FAQ. So again, we'll have to sort of collaborate with how that actually works and what that looks like. So I'll try and take these big ideas and sort of flesh them out with the people in the district that can make us look good.
Can I ask one clarifying point? So on the external communication plan, I just want to clarify that our primary audience there is the general community, correct? We're not potentially saying parents only or teachers or all stakeholders. In that particular strategy, we're trying to communicate and educate the general community.
I would say, for myself, I would say yes. I think our external stakeholders, the entire community fits into that bucket. I think some things would be more relevant to those specific folks, right? Parents and teachers and staff might be more interested in certain elements or not, but I do think that there are huge community members that will also be presented to that. Does anyone disagree with me? No? Okay, so I think this is good for now. So tonight, what I wanted to achieve was developing what those strategies potentially could be and a timeline for that. I think we've done that. So at this point, what I would do is, again, start kind of working, collaborating with Jody for staff, figuring out what is actually possible for what we talked about tonight, and come back at a board meeting, potentially in November when we're already talking about portfolio number 2. That might be a good way to couple that, but I will bring a update at the October meeting so that you know that. Okay. We actually covered 2F because we're talking about timelines for each of those. So I think that we've actually gone through 2E and 2F with that going forward. So the last thing is, again, sort of harkening back to the summer when we had our board retreat, we talked about not only board goals, but also establishing board norms, of operating principles that we were going to abide by as a board while we were in meetings, while we were in session, either a typical board meeting or study session or a retreat. So I have been working on sort of pulling together some of the pieces that we discussed at that retreat, some of the pieces that we've discussed just over time in our own board meetings and things that we've said. I looked at other boards that have similar documents, either whether it's guiding principles, operating principles, norms, everyone calls it something different. And, kind of pulled pieces that I thought were relevant and, part of our value, our value system, and came up with these. So I don't necessarily want to read them all to you now. I will highlight a few things and just go through them really quickly. And I will say before I present all of these, my goal for this, or my best laid plan for this would be to either approve this tonight or get feedback and changes and come back and approve at a later date.
And, physically, every board member signs this at the bottom, and this is posted to our website, on our website. So not only are we committing to these things, but we are telling our community that this is how we're going to be in our meetings and as a board and when we represent the district. We can discuss that later, but just wanted to put that out there in terms of that. That was my plan. So the format of this is basically, kind of from the first person. So as a member of the Litchfield Elementary School Governing Board, I commit to basically the following things. So lead the district with equity and access that supports community-wide collaboration and creativity. Remember that my first and primary concern is the education and welfare of our students, respectful of fellow board members, understand that my role is to ensure that our district is well managed, not to manage the district. Recognize our fiduciary responsibility to ensure financial resources are being distributed in the best interest of our community and cultivating tomorrow's leaders. And the next sort of section is, conduct myself appropriately and professionally at board meetings. Being prepared to participate, listening carefully, being courteous, dignified, fair to others, working collaboratively, and making student-centered decisions, conducting business transparently, rendering decisions based on available facts and independent judgment, respecting and supporting the majority decisions of the board, and adhering to standards of ethical conduct and maintaining confidentiality, particularly in our closed sessions. Ensuring there are opportunities for the diverse range of views in the community that inform all of our board deliberations, expand my knowledge of public education and governance skills, conferences, seminars, workshops, books, and publications, etc. Be an advocate of public education in our school district specifically, serve as an ambassador for the district, refer to the superintendent in complaints, problems, or issues that we get from parents or staff or so that she makes a positive resolution to those before we, discuss them setting or have any meetings about this. And adhere to board developed communication protocols. Again, this is kind of a mixture of things that I've put together for all of our different meetings and things like that. So why don't we start, since there are so many, why don't we start, are there any that are questionable or, you're not comfortable with the wording, or maybe doesn't express the concept of the value that you were looking for? Why don't we start there? We probably have more agreement than disagreement, so I'm hoping. So is there anything here that you're unsure of, uncomfortable with?
I think I'd like to talk about the last one, the adhere to more developed communication protocols. I know that at the beginning of our first year here, when I say our, we sat down and came up with an idea of how emails would be responded to. I think I would like to make sure that we revisit that every year to make sure that we're all on the same plan. I know that my first year here I was a little leery of responding. My second year, coming into third, a little bit more adaptive. So I'd like to make sure we have that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a great conversation we can have, and this in no way prohibits that from happening. Sure, I think we're going to change. I think this also could be, our communication protocols with Judy and the district staff. And obviously, if we have a problem or a question, we typically go through Judy. We don't just reach out to somebody independently. So those communication protocols as well. We know all too well that we cannot, email each other and have conversations, meetings, things like that. So all of that can kind of go in there. But yes, for those things that can be changed or updated, absolutely, we can probably do that, at the board retreat or our evaluation this year, and just to make sure that we're still analyzing as things change and as board members change, for sure.
That was the only one. All the other ones make sense. And I feel like we all pretty much do that. Just to make sure that
I would just like to see the fiduciary responsibility one simplified a little bit. There's a little bit of flowery language there. I'm not really a flowery language person. So,
Flower language? Kim, I don't know what you're talking about.
So I think we can just stop at in the best interest of our community. I don't know that we need to inculcate tomorrow's leaders. That's my personal.
Okay. I'm open to that. I'm open to that change.
I think that should point, right, that is,
That's a given, right?
right.
We can put in there eight.
I agree, I tend to be a little wordy, so. Should put this down. Another reason that I also wanted to make sure that we do this at this point in time is because, the process of electing governing boards is that potentially every 2 years, we can have a different mix of people. We know that we have at least one new person sitting up here in just a couple of months. Look down and see something different. So I think it's important, and again, not that these can't change, because many people come on board, but I think, Elaine, to your point, we're doing a lot of these things. These are our values, these are our core beliefs as a district and as human beings and as people and team members and leaders of an organization. I think, we're doing most of these things at every turn anyway. I think it's important to write them down. I think it's important to make a commitment. I think it's important to say these things are important and we're going to do it, and be hopeful that anyone else that would join this group of awesome superheroes, that they'd be willing to make that same commitment, for everyone to see. Because part of this, and I didn't say this earlier, but I will now, part of this is that once it's in writing, we've committed to this, then this becomes an accountability measure. As part of our self-evaluation, as part of our group retreat every year, as we do with the district and other staff. Again, trying to make this a very even playing field that I never feel comfortable asking someone else to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And I think this is part of it, is holding us accountable and people being able to say, well, you're not doing that. You're not holding up to that commitment. You're not providing things that you said that you would. So.
I think these are fantastic, and thank you, Danielle, for putting these together for us and going through and really putting together what we've all been talking about in various meetings and our board retreats. I think that this is fantastic, and I do agree that it holds us accountable, and by posting it to our website, it tells the community this is what is important to us in our meetings, and this is how we are going to act, and we want you as a community to call us out if we're not. So I think they're really wonderful.
Thank you. Literally exactly what I was just going to say. So, ditto.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for taking the time to put these together. I will just ask one more question if anyone has on this particular one. So this one says the third board norm and respectful of fellow board members and all in LESC. Does that read a little weird to anybody else?
Which one would say all staff?
I don't know, staff. I don't like stakeholders really either. I don't know what it would say, but this is still like maybe the word. So try to take out the fellow board members and just say and respectful of all in LESC, and it feels like it means all something. Okay. Not to be, but this is me like set in stone now.
How about
like
how about fellow board members and all of our stakeholders?
Word really overused, but that was just no use on it, but that word is, stakeholder. It is.
I'm just gonna get on this.
Members of LAFC? Sorry, do you want it specifically linked to LAFC? Because then it could be, I'm respectful of fellow board members and our LAFC. Thank you. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm respectful of fellow board members and all in the LAFC. Nice. And what do you think? Perfect. I love the family language. I love that too. And that was one thing that I didn't put in here specifically. I mean, I know a lot of these same things resonate about that, but I didn't put that in specifically, not because I don't think it's important, but rather I couldn't figure out the language. So over time, if you do want to add that or reinterpret this, please, this kind of living document. But that was one thing that I was like, I just don't know how to really articulate of figured out how conscious discipline plays into our meetings. That is one of my goals, to figure out how that works. So expect more to come on that, but
I think you need to talk to Mike.
oh, yes, no, I have many notes. I have many notes about how to, all the things that I want to talk to Mary about. She's a little busy right now, so I haven't asked her to also come up with a monthly agenda item on discipline because I'm not a nice person. I just want to give her some time, but it's coming, so don't worry. It's on my list. In this little black book right here, Megan, so it will happen. Okay. So wrap this up. This is our last item here. So with the following changes, I will present this for approval. Bullet point number 3, changes to and respectful of fellow board members and all in the LESD family. Bullet point number 5, changes to recognize our fiduciary responsibility to ensure financial resources are being distributed in the best interest of our community. Period. I didn't have any other suggestion changes. Okay, then I will open the floor for a motion.
I move to approve the governing board norms with changes as just stated by President.
All right, second. There's no further questions. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, motion carries. Thank you guys very much. This was actually a pretty fun project because, like you said, we're doing all of these things anyway, but just being able to make that commitment, I think, adds another level of importance and kind of value to it. Thank you for going through that exercise with me. And we are done. Thank you guys. This is our second of 3 meetings this month, so I do appreciate everyone's additional time and tabling these things from the last minute, excuse me, from the last meeting. So I second. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.